Good afternoon and welcome to the January regular meeting of the Calgary Police Commission. I call this meeting to order and ask that everyone ensure your microphones are muted until you need to speak. My name is Sean Cornett and I am the chair of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Amtul Siddiqui, Susan Mallon, Heather Campbell, Shireen Ison-Jordan, Kelly Ogle, Samuel Hope, Robert Tangay, Ayo Adirdran, and Councillors Jennifer Wyness and Terry Wong, who will join us in a little while. Commissioner TJ Sang will be joining us later, but he sends his regrets for the first portion of today's meeting. Today's Calgary Police Service representatives are led by Chief Constable Mark Neufeld. Chief, would you please introduce those you expect to speak during today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, Councillors, and Commissioners. I'd just like to thank you for having us this afternoon. My name is Claire Smart. I'm the Superintendent and Executive Officer for Chief Neufeld. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the executive leadership team, and I'll start from my far right, which will be Director Michael Nunn of the Strategic Communications Section, Executive Director Catherine Murphy of the Legal and Regulatory Services Division, Deputy Chief Raj Gill, Bureau of Community Policing, Deputy Chief Paul Cook, Bureau of Investigative Support, Chief Constable Mark Neufeld, Deputy Chief Chad Tofik, Bureau of Organizational Performance, Inspector Avril Martin, Bureau of Service and Community Support, Chief People Officer Kim Armstrong, Bureau of People and Organizational Development, and Acting Executive Director Tricia Spademan, Finance Division. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone for being here. For those not familiar with our role, our commission is a body of 10 community members and 2 city councillors appointed by City Council and the Government of Alberta. We provide independent citizen governance and oversight of the Calgary Police Service on behalf of all Calgarians. To protect the political neutrality of the police, Alberta's Police Act requires that the police chief report directly to us instead of elected officials. We provide direction to the police through the chief, police policies, monitoring the police complaint process, and approval of how the police budget is spent. Today is one of 8 regular meetings we have each year to openly discuss police governance and oversight matters with the service's leadership and to hear from the public. We also have several private monthly committee meetings where commissioners work more directly with the service on various matters that cannot be discussed publicly. Our commission is meeting today on the ancestral and traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, Piikani, and Omska-Bebe Piikani, the Kainai First Nations. It is also home to the Iathka, Nakota, Wiskatabi First Nations, comprised of Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation. These are the people who made a treaty with the Crown, forming Treaty 7 territory. Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to Métis Nation of Alberta. Our commission is committed to doing our part to address the inequity and intergenerational trauma caused by past and current wrongs, to support reconciliation with all Indigenous people who share this land with us. Our commission also condemns racism and prejudice in all forms and is committed to being anti-racist. We stand in solidarity with all Calgarians who are Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. For those joining us for the first time, allow me to provide a brief overview of the format of our meeting for today. The public session of this meeting is being live streamed, and a recording will be posted online so we can make it available to those unable to attend. There will be several presentations from the Calgary Police Service, commission members, and commission staff. Commissioners will have the chance to ask questions or make comments after each one. Once we have completed the presentations, we will move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. Those who are registered to speak will then be called on by name and will have a chance to either ask a question or make a presentation for our consideration. Following the public participation, we will close the public meeting with the chief and I taking questions from the media. Everyone's welcome to observe the media availability, but only media professionals can participate. To start our agenda items, I will now call for declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest from the commissioners. Hearing no declarations, I will now ask for approval of the agenda. Does any member of the commission wish to request an amendment to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, I will now ask for approval of the consent agenda. For those viewing today's meeting, the consent agenda is a list of routine items and reports that all commissioners agree can be accepted without more discussion or a separate vote. Does any member of the commission wish to request an item on the consent agenda be brought forward for discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I declare both the agenda and consent agenda approved as presented. For my chair's report, I want to start by acknowledging some important days that recently occurred or are coming next month. While it's very late, this is my first opportunity to wish everyone a Happy New Year. I hope the holiday season was filled with joy for all the communities that had special days, including Christmas, Kwanzaa, and Hanukkah. Our commission would also like to wish those celebrating the Lunar New Year next month all the best in the coming year. On a less joyful note, this past week was also a time to remember the need to constantly fight against anti-Semitism, racism, and hate, as our community marked both International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the anniversary of the horrific attack on the Islamic Cultural Center in Quebec City 7 years ago. Our commission would also like to acknowledge both these days of remembrance and call on everyone in Calgary to work together to make sure that hate-fueled violence has no place in our city. Finally, I want to recognize that February is Black History Month. Canadian history is full of amazing Black people who did extraordinary things for our nation, often without getting the recognition or the place in history they deserved. I hope everyone gets a few opportunities next month to learn more about the legacy of Black people in Canada and what work is still left to achieve equity in our country. As far as the work of our commission, we've been working hard to get our new commissioners up to speed. 3 of our commissioners completed ride-alongs to learn more about policing, and we held a training day on the roles and responsibilities of the commission earlier this month. Our commission also had the opportunity a few weeks ago to visit the Calgary Police Service Forensic Center, where we learned about the role and capabilities of the Forensics Crime Scenes Unit. The visit was incredibly informative, and we are grateful to the CPS members that hosted us. Just before the holidays, a few commissioners and I also had the opportunity to help welcome 2023's final class of new recruits at their graduation. It's always an honor to be part of the graduation celebration, and our commission wants to once again congratulate Class 252 on their new career. And finally, our commission was pleased to see the province's grant for 50 more police officers finalized in December. The service and provincial staff worked hard in consultation with our commission to negotiate terms for the grant that will ensure sustainable funding for more officers. The province's 50 new officers will join 130 new officers that the City of Calgary has funded since 2022 to address staffing shortages and the increasing demands on the service. We are happy to have the support of both the province and the council in ensuring the police have the staffing levels that they need. I would like now, as always, to recognize some of the ways that the members of the Calgary Police Service have delivered on the policing priorities of Calgarians. To start, I want to congratulate the service on once again being recognized as one of Alberta's top 80 employers. As we continue to have a big need for new recruits, this recognition, no doubt, will help people considering a career in policing to look more closely at Calgary. On the operational front, contentious protests over the war in Gaza that started in our city in November continued to challenge the service into December. Frontline members had to deal with the volatile and unpredictable situations and still managed to keep the peace. I want to thank the officers of the Public Safety Unit for continually showing up to prevent conflicts between groups and to minimize as much as possible the disruption to the community. The service also worked incredibly hard to engage the involved communities to try to de-escalate the protests and facilitate everyone's right to protest without interfering in the rights of others. There was a noticeable effort to communicate with the community, which was very much appreciated. Officers also had some big successes addressing crime in public spaces. An undercover operation along the C train took multiple weapons off the street and resulted in 27 people being charged with 212 drug trafficking offenses. True to the service's value of compassion, law enforcement action was immediately followed by a second phase of the operation that brought outreach teams into the stations to support people struggling with addiction. The service continued this balance of compassion and enforcement with encampments in our city. Frontline officers have been working closely with the partners to ensure that criminal activity in encampments is swiftly addressed and that encampments are removed, while still giving people living in the camps the supports and dignity they deserve. It's not an easy task to balance compassion and rooting out dangerous criminals. I want to thank all the officers who have struck this balance so professionally through this winter. Successes have also been seen around gun violence in our city. The service has been strongly focused on addressing gun crime, and those efforts now appear to be paying off. Calgary saw 21% fewer shootings in 2023 than in the year prior, and for the first time in 6 years, saw a decrease in the presence of guns being used to commit other crimes. While I know investigators and frontline members will continue to keep the pressure up on those who use guns for crime, it's nice to see some good news on this front. I also want to thank the task force that investigated the September riot in Falconridge. Immediately after the incident, many people believed there would be little or no accountability for those involved. Through your professionalism, skill, and determination, you proved them wrong. In total, 28 people are now facing 63 charges for the violence that occurred. From the officers that responded to the chaos on that day, to the investigators that relentlessly worked to collect evidence and lay charges, thank you for showing that violent and lawless protests are not tolerated in Calgary. Finally, the service once again showed innovation and a willingness to collaborate with the community as it rolled out a community engagement vehicle and the Bridgeland Riverside Engagement Link. These two new approaches to community engagement will allow officers to connect with more people, businesses, and community groups to make sure that policing in Calgary is responsible to Calgarians. While I know these highlights only scratch the surface of all the great work done by members of the Calgary Police Service, I want to thank everyone who is involved in each of them. Calgarians notice, we notice, and value and appreciate all your great work. Thank you. With that, I conclude my chair's report, and we will now move on to our presentations from the Calgary Police Service. What's that? 2 weeks. Okay, all right, just checking process. We'll be starting off today with a presentation from the service on the 2024 Annual Policing Plan. The Annual Policing Plan is a document that the service produces each year in consultation with our commission. It outlines the policing priorities for the upcoming year and the activities the service will focus on to meet the needs and expectations of Calgarians. Our commission has been discussing this year's plan with the service as far back as the Calgary Policing Summit in September, during which input was gathered from a broad cross-section of Calgarians. Earlier this month, the draft plan was further discussed and refined during our various committee meetings. And now we're proud to share the final plan with Calgarians as it comes to our commission for final approval. So Chief Neufeld, please go ahead with your opening remarks and the first presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the thoughtful introduction. I want to say thank you quickly to the police commissioners as well for getting out into the service, as was mentioned there over the last month. I can tell you with full confidence that the members of the service really appreciate when the commission members get out and see the important work that they're doing in the community and how it's going. So thank you so much for taking the time and interest to do that. It gives me great pleasure to present the 2024 Annual Policing Plan. Just for introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Tofik, who will introduce the presentation.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chair, and members of the Commission. We have a number of representatives from the CPS here to present the plan, as well as help with answering questions that there may be. We have Manager for Strategic Planning and Evaluation Unit, Amory Hamilton-Henry, Manager Rebecca Davidson of our Corporate Data and Analytics Unit, Business Strategist Jason Archibald, and online, I believe Inspector Bev Voros may be available as well from our Strategic Planning, Research and Analysis section. As mentioned, we're bringing forward the final draft of the 2024 Annual Policing Plan, understanding that it'll go to design to finalize. We have moved to reporting this publicly, as you'll hear in the presentation, in the interest of transparency, both to Commission and to the community. We appreciate the input that's already been provided by Commission. You'll see some of that within the presentation. So I'll, without further ado, turn it over to the team to go through the presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Councillors. The annual policing plan is aligned with our strategy, which is the long-term strategic framework of the Calgary Police Service, and informed by the commitments made in the four-year service plan and budget. And as noted by Chair Cornett, the APP outlines the goals and expected outcomes that the service will prioritize in meeting the needs of the community and/or employees in 2024. It also serves as an additional mechanism for us to track and report on our progress throughout the year. The APP was developed through consultation with the CPC, information ascertained from the public through the most recent citizens survey and the Calgary Policing Summit, assessment of the CPS risk register, analysis of the current environment, and robust internal consultation. I will hand over to Jason, the business strategist leading this initiative, who will take us through the presentation on the agreed areas of focus for 2024 and our plan for reporting on the APP. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. All right, so the 2024 annual policing plan has 4 focus areas, 9 outcomes, 15 goals, and 42 key performance indicators, or KPIs. The KPIs are not listed here, but they are referenced in the APP document. This is what our future annual reporting will look like. The report card view is a one-page summary for the year. A status indicator will show the status of each goal in the right-hand column. You can then drill down to see the KPIs that sit below each goal. The objective is to provide a comprehensive one-page overview that will allow people to see what's going well and what needs improvement at a glance, and then drill down for further details if needed. Okay. Our 4 focus areas include our people, our diversity, our community, and our performance. Our people focuses on creating and sustaining safe and healthy workplaces where people feel engaged, as well as resourcing the service to maximize operational performance and employee well-being. Our diversity focuses on advancing our anti-racism commitments and progressing a culture of accessibility, inclusion, and belonging. Our community focuses on community safety and well-being and building public trust and confidence. Our performance looks to achieve excellence in service delivery while being fiscally responsible and providing efficient and accessible data for decision-making and transparency. This graphic shows what the 3 reporting levels will look like. At the top, we have the goal view, which is the report card. In the middle, we have the KPI view. This shows the KPIs that sit below each goal. You can see the status for each KPI here. At the bottom, in the details view, we have this view for each performance indicator. This will contain baseline and target information, primary ownership and contact data, as well as narrative details, including context and supporting activities. Activity details in this section will provide information about the work supporting the performance indicator and will share what is going well and what actions are being taken to address any issues. Our report has 4 appendices, including the one-page report card, an appendix with performance indicators, baselines, and targets, an appendix with primary ownership and contact information for each KPI, and Appendix D, which has Council's 12 KPIs and their connections to other reports. Okay, for the stoplights, for reporting at the KPI level, we will display status as a single color, so green, yellow, or red. If it's a mid-year or fall update, these will correspond to activity progress. If it's an annual report, these will correspond to KPI data. For reporting at the goal level, so one level up, each goal indicator will show a pie with 2 or 3 slices, depending on how many KPIs are below it. The slices will represent the statuses of the KPIs below that goal. We set performance indicators by consulting across the organization, including with each of the bureaus. They reflect service and work plan priorities. We limited each goal to a maximum of 3 KPIs for reporting efficiency. We also consulted across the organization for setting target values. They provide a balance of stretch goals with those that are realistically achievable. So now we're going to start using the annual policing plan. We'll return to Commission with a mid-year narrative update in June, and then again in October with a fall narrative update. And then we'll bring forward the completed 2024 APP in January or February of 2025. All right, thanks very much. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. And I would just like to say, while it looks like a lot of information and KPIs and goals and objectives, it's a huge operation covering the whole city and so many things. And to narrow it down is very difficult. It's been an evolution over a couple of years. And so I think this is a great format and look forward to using it this coming year. So congratulations on that. With that, I will turn it over to commissioners and ask if they have any questions. A note to people listening, we did see this plan over each of the committee meetings a couple of weeks ago. So there have been some questions asked, and I see some of that has already been incorporated. So thank you for that. So are there other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Nyssen-Jordan.
Thank you. Great work. It's always interesting to watch KPIs get developed and get distilled over time. So I see this as a big improvement from the previous year. So thank you for that. Just a question, your comment about, we got input from across the organization. How much does that get down to the actual, police officer on the street? Do you actually have incorporation of, do they get a chance to see these so that they know what their organization is being held to as well? Or is it middle management and higher?
I can tackle that, Commissioner. Certainly, the strategic planning portion is at a higher leadership level, but as far as communicating it across the organization, we do contemplate that. So just prior to today's meeting as well, we've pushed it out to the entire service through a memorandum to everyone to have access to the link and also to ask questions through their leadership teams. But the priorities are really reflected in other things that you would see coming through the organization, such as pathways to engagement priorities and things of that nature. So through the leadership teams, it does come up that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? No, I don't see any. So hearing no further questions, you got a lot 2 weeks ago, so they had patience. They spent an hour every day for 4 days getting many questions, so lots of feedback and input, but thank you very much for this. If seeing no further questions, then we need, go ahead, Chief.
I'm just going to say really quickly, I just want to say thank you to the group there. This was a lot of work, and there was a lot of work going down to the middle area of the organization to try to make sure that we did have more coming from the front line, as it were, workers, wherever those may be, and sworn or civilians. So we're going to continue to work in that direction. But knowing that we were going to go report publicly on this, I really liked the format that we came out with. It seems simple. It's not easy taking something as complex as you mentioned across the organization and making it simple. And with the 3 layers where people can have a look at basically the scorecard, report card view, and then go down for those who want more information, I think it'll be really good. Obviously, we will take the feedback from the public and the commission this year as well. But I think this has been a work in progress. We knew it would be, and I'm the happiest I've been with this in all the years. So super good work by the group involved there. I just want to say thanks to everyone who had a hand.
Thank you. And Commissioner Siddiqui, please go ahead.
Sorry for my late question. Thanks for the presentation. I think one of the requests I had was if there was some place here that showed the ownership of the KPI, and I think you mentioned that, but maybe I just can't see it in the
Yeah, it's in one of the appendices. I think it's Appendix C. And it's a table dedicated just to the expressing the ownership for each KPI.
Okay, so it doesn't sit in the goal view or the KPI view or in the details view then?
I think we'll have that information in the details view,
Okay.
but that'll be later when we actually bring the report forward.
Okay.
For now, it's just sitting in the table.
That would be great, because then if it's just sitting there, then we can, versus going into the appendices and looking at
Right.
it, so. Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else? With that, we need a motion to approve the 2024 annual policing plan as presented. And so I see Commissioner Campbell move that, and second by Commissioner Mallon. Those in favor? And any opposed? Seeing no opposed, I will move that this is accepted. So great, it's a go. Awesome. Thank you very much. It has been a ton of work, many months of work, so thank you to all. And with that, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Services Redirect Program. So I'll turn it back over to the service.
Thank you, Chair. We're proud to bring this presentation on Redirect 2024. I'm going to turn it over to Inspector Martin to lead this year, but I think it's timely. It actually addresses a lot of, or not a lot, but some of the issues that we're facing in community right now and with youth. And so you'll see that there's been some changes in the program, some augmentation over the years, but I think this is a really timely program and one that's going to serve us well in 2024 and certainly going forward. So over to you, Avril. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I'll just give a brief overview of the program, then I'll turn it over to Crystal and Stacy to give a presentation on the evolution of the Redirect program. So the Redirect program was developed in about 2015 as a partnership between CPS and the City of Calgary with the mandate to address violent extremism and radicalization amongst young adults ages 12 to 28. So the voluntary program was initially funded through Public Safety Canada, and to date, the team, which consists of one sworn police officer, which is Stacey O'Connor, and one registered social worker, which is Nicole Karen, works in partnership with other agencies to offer education, awareness, early intervention for at-risk youth ages 12 to 18. So this presentation will be that overview of the Redirect program from inception to current state. So welcome, Stacey O'Connor, a 21-year member with the Calgary Police Service. Online, I said we have Nicole Karen, her partner and social worker, 20 years experience as a social worker, and then Crystal Hinks, a social research policy analyst with the City of Calgary. So over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. As mentioned, I'm Crystal Hinks, and this is Stacy. We'll be giving you just a brief overview of sort of how the Redirect program has changed over the last year, and then we will welcome any of the questions you have about the program. So just a brief agenda sort of what we're going to cover, an introduction on the background of the Redirect program, how it started, talk about the new direction that we've developed over the last 6 months or so. And then we're going to present to you the theory of change, which sort of outlines where the program is going long-term and the intended social impact, as well as the program process so that there is some understanding of how youth move through the program, as well as the evaluation plan. So Redirect started back in 2015. Around 2013, there was some concerns about Canadians being involved in both domestic and international terrorism incidents. And in response, the federal government prepared a report in 2014 to sort of look at how this should be responded to. In response, they found that there was a need to address violent extremism and radicalization, particularly amongst young people. And so a funding stream was developed to support police departments across the country in developing partnerships with their communities to provide some preventative and early intervention programming for individuals that were demonstrating some at-risk behaviors and or were actively engaged in anything related to radicalization and violent extremism. Public Safety Canada did provide this funding stream, and a number of police agencies across Canada were provided with 5 years of programming dollars. The Calgary Police Department was one of those police departments. And so the program began, and they basically just worked on bringing together a social worker as well as a police officer to develop programming and work on intervention. And so the original program, as mentioned, was a police officer, a social worker, and there was also a mental health clinician from Alberta Health Services provided as well. And the focus was on building resilience amongst youth and young people aged 12 to 28, which is quite a large age gap. So it would capture the very young people that were sort of developing some antisocial behaviors in adolescence, as well as adults that were perhaps participating in some more serious and concerning behaviors. So between 2015 and 2022, there was approximately 104 referrals to the program, and 45 of those referrals became active clients. The program model was centered on education awareness as well as early intervention, and this included really addressing the underlying vulnerabilities that can lead to radicalization. And the program was really focused on reducing this antisocial thinking and behavior, poor decision-making, and negative behavior. Several challenges did arise throughout the 5-year funding program, particularly staffing and program changes throughout on both sides in terms of leadership on the police side, the frontline workers that were involved in providing the interventions to the youth, as well as the positions on the city side. Another issue was limited referrals and appropriate clients. With a new program like this, particularly tackling something related to terrorism, it was difficult to identify who might be appropriate. So the program did receive a number of different referrals for a variety of concerning behaviors. The mental health clinician was working under capacity, and that position was actually removed from the program in the middle of the program. During the pandemic. And so that also reduced the ability for the program to offer very intensive mental health supports for these clients. There was also a lack of consistent evaluations and final evaluation outcomes, so it was very difficult to measure success in terms of identifying what the clients were completing for programming, as well as what the outcomes were for them. In 2022, the Public Safety Canada funding did end, and the program did continue with support of both the city and the Calgary Police Service. And in 2023, my department was asked to provide some support for redirect and look at whether or not the program needed to be changed, whether or not we needed to look for additional funding to continue the programming. And so in meeting with the program and various partners, we sort of noticed that there was really a need to shift the program a little bit more. So what we did is we had several consultation meetings, and we found that it would be better to move away from radicalization and towards a broader scope of ideological and hate-motivated conflict. This would allow the program to capture those youth that were perhaps not moving in a direction of radicalization or extremism, but were also engaged in some hate-related behaviors. We also separated the programming into 2 streams. One was education and awareness for those at-risk youth that maybe didn't meet the threshold for some more serious behavior, but that still looked like they needed some interventions, as well as the intensive case management for those individuals that who had more concerning behavior. We decided to move the program in the direction of being aligned with the YARD and MAST programs of CPS, and that is focusing on youth age 12 to 18. We see some clients move between the 3 programs, and so it made sense to align them in that way. The team still does consist of a police officer and social worker. We just still do not have the mental health worker. And we also did some new branding. So you can see the new logo here, as well as a tagline that says resilient youth and reduce conflict. And so we wanted to be able to have that to just sort of explain what the program is. When you look at the logo, and you can see also the logo represents the Calgary Police Service colors as well as the City of Calgary colors. The program goals remain somewhat the same as the original program. It is to provide individualized supports to youth and reduce those vulnerabilities, as well as increase resiliency for them. We also want to support the families of these youth, because we know that there is a cascade effect, and that when you support those parents, they can better support their own young people. And we also wanted to increase awareness in the community for schools, other organizations, and families in general about what makes the youth vulnerable to hate and ideological motivated conflict. And so the team has worked quite diligently on holding in services with other programs and just sort of getting the word out about what Redirect is all about. You can see the outcomes here. We've got 4 main outcome areas. The first is improved resilience against ideological and hate-motivated conflict. The second is reduced vulnerability to isolation and antisocial behavior. Those are two areas that we constantly see amongst these youth. We want to increase the protective factors that foster motivation and independence. And we also want to increase pro-social attitudes towards individuals and society. We developed a theory of change for redirect. There was not one for the original program. And again, through consultation, this sort of outlines the roadmap of how youth move through the program. And the theory of change is really focused on providing targeted interventions to address the psychosocial risk factors that make youth vulnerable to ideological and hate-motivated conflict. And we believe that if we offer those supports, youth will develop the self-esteem, life skills, and pro-social attitudes and behaviors needed to resist engaging in conflict with others. And so there are a number of early outcomes that we see just through engagement with the program. And then intermediate outcomes come later on once there's some skill building and some resilience building in place. And the long-term outcomes are about functional well-being, social well-being, and emotional well-being. This is an overview of the program, the process. So you can see there's quite a large list of referral sources. It's certainly not exhaustive, but these tend to be the main referral sources. So everything from school resource officers, community agencies, as well as the families of young people if they have concerns. An intake form is completed. It's quite lengthy and gathers a lot of information. And then the program conducts some collateral interviews. They do a triage meeting, and then they determine if the person is a fit for the program. And if the client is not, they make sure that they offer some support for the referral source and offer some other suggestions of where it might be a better fit. If the client is accepted into the program, they move into either the education and awareness stream or the case management stream. Both of them are very similar. The case management piece is longer, and generally the threshold for that is that if the person needs some more intensive mental health supports. And as we see, all of this work gets done through a variety of curriculum activities, connection to social activities, connection to employment, education, and other long-term services, with the outcomes being that there's improved resilience and reduced vulnerability. And then we have a number of evaluation metrics that we've put in place as well through various assessment tools that we've brought into the program, as well as looking at program data and participant surveys. This is just a brief overview of the evaluation plan. We have the self-sufficiency matrix, which is a matrix that looks at various domains in the individual's life, and it is scored numerically from 1 to 5. We score the youth at the beginning of the program every 6 months and then at the end, and we can look and see if their scores are improving or not. We also have the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. This is an evidence-based tool that was developed by a child psychologist. It is used throughout schools and programs all over the world. And it's a behavioral screening questionnaire to really look at emotional symptoms, conduct problems, hyperactivity, and it does capture pro-social attitudes, which is important to the redirect program. There's also numerical scores that, again, we can measure to see if there's been improvement. And then we also have the program data. So that's looking at the number of youth coming through, the number of referrals, the number of activities they're engaged in, supports for families, and various other metrics. And we also have an exit survey that participants will fill out just to find out if they actually enjoyed being in the program. Okay, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Tanguay, I think, and then Commissioner Campbell. And
Thank
Siddiqui.
you. Sorry. Thank you for the presentation. I'm concerned about the terminology used with ideology. What ideology? Ideology is a broad term. Democracy is an ideology. Christianity is an ideology. Using broad terms like that make it pretty wide open and confusing as to what you're looking at. And I'm just curious, when you use the term ideology, what is your thinking on that, and how may others interpret or perhaps misinterpret that?
So we did not want to fully omit the potential clients that would have been in the original redirect program. So those types of clients are still welcome to be referred if there's any concerns about extremism and radicalization. But really, we utilize the term ideology because we looked at the clients in the past, both who had been referred and who had been through the program. And we found that there was a number of them that were very concrete in their thinking around ideology. So one of the findings that we've seen so far, and it's quite anecdotal, is that a number of the clients have an autism diagnosis or have a suspected autism diagnosis. And with that comes a certain type of thinking. And so it can become ideological. And we want to make sure that we're still able to provide supports to those youth. And so we've had to keep it broad that way so that we can meet the needs of the various youth that come through the program, because the scope can't be so narrow that then it weeds those youth out, because if they're sort of have that concrete thinking, then there's concern there. So really, if somebody is sort of fixated on religion, they might not be a fit. There's a sort of a rubric that the team uses to triage these youth, and there has to be some certain behaviors that are present. So there has to be actual conflict with others when it comes to an individual's thoughts and beliefs, and it has to sort of be leading more towards conflict, not just holding a belief, but it's that it's leading to conflict with others.
I guess the worry is the interpretation can then determine, whoever may be leading it may determine this is ideological. The next person may say, well, that wasn't ideological, this is ideological. So it leads it to significant amount of subjectivity, which I get, you're trying to keep it open, but I just feel like there should be a little bit more specificity as to what you're looking at. What you just described to me may help with that.
Yes, and we anticipate that this year, because we've just redeveloped the program, we're really in a pilot year. Although the program has been around for several years, this is a new iteration of that. And so we are just piloting this year and going to be doing lots of evaluation work and looking at who is coming through the program, what the referrals are, if we're seeing those types of things. And then that's probably going to be a bigger conversation at the end of the year when we do some evaluation work, because you're right, it's going to be difficult to both triage and to serve those clients when it is subjective. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is we're seeing it with a pilot lens, knowing that things might change and shift throughout the year as we see who comes through the program and what types of supports that they're having access to.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the presentation and for the attention on what I think is an extremely valuable program for Calgary. We all witnessed the aftermath of the tragic hate-based murder of the Offstall family in London, Ontario. Calgary, unfortunately, has citizens who are members of the Ku Klux Klan, the Soldiers of or Sons of Odin, the Three Percenters, and in particular, the Proud Boys, the AWD, and the Base, the last three of which are listed terrorist entities in Canada. So what specific programming is designed for young people by Redirect who are drawn into these white supremacist, white nationalist, neo-Nazi terrorist groups? Is it use of the theory of change model?
Yes, so really by the time someone has joined those groups and is active in them, we know that they're a little more entrenched than this program is intending to support. That isn't to say that those individuals could not come through the program if they meet the criteria. But really we're looking at intervention. In all the research into how individuals wind up with those types of organizations, we see that there's really a lot of vulnerability, a lot of isolation, a lot of time spent on internet alone. And so the program is really working to reduce those vulnerabilities by connecting youth to various supports in the community. And a major component is just trying to increase the productive use of time and constructive use of time. So this means helping youth find employment, find activities and hobbies to have, connecting with their families, helping identify a positive adult role model in their life, keeping them engaged in school. And this is across the board, not just for Redirect, but for all youth programming. We know if kids are connected and they're engaged and they're busy, they can't get themselves into trouble all the time. So particularly with that, with those types of groups, so we know that pro-social attitudes is a large component. So one of the curriculum activities that we've included with the program this year is to bring in the Courage to Change journal program, which is often used in corrections and in the justice system A lot of it's used in probation as well. So it is an introspective journaling curriculum where the youth completes a journal. There's lots of questions just to get them thinking about their own attitudes and beliefs. And then there's facilitation that occurs from both Stacy and Nicole. And they work through that journal with the youth and they have those big conversations and do some mentoring, or they maybe identify an area where the youth needs to be referred somewhere else because they're hearing or seeing something troubling. And so having just some more activities that are very targeted towards pro-social attitudes is going to be a big component of reducing the vulnerability to joining those types of groups.
Thank you so much. In the guise of early intervention, a similar question: what specific programming is designed for young people by Redirect who are drawn into hate and violence towards transgender youth and those within the 2S LGBTQ IA community?
Hi, thank you. We do look at each client and family coming in very individualized, and we come up with a plan specifically for them and family. So if there is issues in relation to right-wing extremism, then we need to look at exactly what that looks like for client and family, and then move them through whatever protective factors might benefit them. So if that means connecting, like watching videos online that are, showing the negative side of right-wing extremism and how it impacts, then we move that way. We did have a client that had some anti-Semitism views, and we were able to connect with the Jewish Center, and they were able to take not only just the client, but the family through the tour to kind of go, okay, this is the impact that your decision had moving forward. And then the client was able to write up a narrative at the end with help of family members to go over what he did, why he did it, and how it impacted not only himself, but others.
And so you would do a similar thing for a child using homophobic and transphobic slurs and okay.
Yeah, very individualized.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Siddiqui?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I have immense respect for this program, so thank you for this. I actually know a youth who went through the program early on and was able to change his life. So thank you for that. 2 questions for you. 1, do you have more need than resources?
No, we don't.
Okay. Do you have anything to add? So with what you have right now, you're able to handle the referrals that are coming in and to be able to do the programming?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And then my second question was, what is the relationship that you have with the families? You gave a great example where you took them through the family through the tour as well. What resources are available to families during the program, after, and what's the follow-up that you do with the individuals that go through the program?
We do keep in constant communication with parents going through the program, especially when they're youth, because it did move from age 12 to 28 to 12 to 18. And because it's a voluntary program, we always have to get approval through the parents first for the youth. But in relation to follow-up with the clients and family members, my partner and I always take the time to sit down, leave our contact information. We constantly get contact from family members after the time like that they're closed successfully through the program to follow up with maybe additional resources that they're needing in the community that they may have forgotten about. I'm not sure if you have anything else.
No,
We could provide a ton of variety of supports depending on what it looks like for each case. So if they're needing supports with tutoring, rec memberships for pro-social activities, could be art, could be language, basic necessities like good food box program, referrals to those necessities. I'm probably leaving out a bunch of stuff, but there's a lot of things we could do for each family.
Great, thank you. And I don't know if you can answer this question or not. I think when the program started, there was a lot of foreign fighters going abroad, and that was sort of a big part of the focus. Are there trends that you're seeing in terms of certain areas or areas that are increasing now with youth that you're working with in Redirect?
I would say that the trends kind of moving forward that we've recently noticed since me joining in the program, we've had a higher percentage of clients having autism coming through. So as a team, we're doing our job right now to get connected with more autism resources, get some more training around that so that we can better work with clients and families and get them access to those specific resources.
I think that Nicole has her hand up and wants to speak. If we can put her, can you unmute yourself or participate?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to meet with the commission today. I just wanted to go back to the question about resources needed. I know that in the presentation we spoke about how we had a clinician previously, and this also ties in with Stacy's comment about an increase in autistic individuals being identified for our program. If I was to identify one area, that would be an area where we would need additional supports. And we are currently working on building relationships with other community serving agencies that provide counseling options for individuals. So I just wanted to add that as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, and good clarification. Commissioner Nyson-Jordan.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This program was designed originally around radicalization, and then you moved to the hate conflict, hate-motivated conflict. All of your evaluation is based on really individuals. I don't see anything from an evaluation perspective tackling the hate motivation part of it. You know, how well do we do? We're seeing it increased. So how are we measuring that? You're dealing with individuals when we really want big population change. So have you done some thinking about that? That's the first question. I'm going to ask the other one really quick because I often forget. The second, is there an advantage, or you're going to tell me the advantage of having a police officer and a police program involved with this? Because what you're describing is, you know, there's a lot of social work, a lot of mental health support. What advantage is it to have Calgary Police Service involved in this type of program?
Oh, so I'll answer the advantages for you, and then Crystal will answer the first one. So I think the biggest thing in relation to having a police officer with the program is that we are able to build those relationships with some of the clients and families that have either had obstacles or challenges with them in the past, currently. And I think as I can come in or another police officer can come in, they can provide that mentorship and education in relation to what a police officer does, and how they can help support people.
And I would also add that some of these youth are being referred to the program because they have had contact with the justice system, although this is not an offender management program. For example, there are some youth that are getting into fights at school, and there might be a hate-based component to it. And so they are referred to the program, and they've maybe had a negative interaction with the police, or they just need to have a positive interaction with the justice system as a whole. And so having the police officer there, much like the YARD and MASS programs as well, is just to develop that positive association with law enforcement. And as for your first question, you're very right. It is very difficult to look at someone's behavior and say for certain that they're going to engage in something bigger and more concerning down the road. We don't have the ability to look around that corner, but we do know what vulnerabilities do lead to that type of behavior. And so for some youth that are engaged in that behavior, we can measure whether or not they're engaging in it throughout the program. Excuse me. And then long term, we don't have the ability to do a longitudinal study to see where some of these youth end up. It would be great to do that. The YARD program is currently doing that. And I think as we align more with YARD and MAST, it would be ideal if we can then look at what's happening with them long term. But really, we just know that reducing vulnerability is going to reduce conflict across the board. So even if there's not a hate motivated component, but definitely measuring hate can be quite difficult, particularly because we do have lots of freedom of expression legislation in this country. And also, you know, people are entitled to sort of say what they want to a certain degree, and particularly amongst youth. And as we've talked about with youth that have an autism diagnosis, suspected or confirmed, some of them are really fixated on what they're saying, and sometimes they don't always understand the implications of what they're saying. And so it can create conflict. And so we're looking at working with those types of youth to teach them sort of, this is your inside voice and this is your outside voice, and do the best we can with that, because they're not necessarily actively promoting conflict, but there's something going on with them where they're maybe unable to stop themselves from engaging in that behavior. So it's quite a challenge to deliver this type of programming given the variety of clients that come through it.
Can I just follow up your comment about long-term evaluation? You've now had the program since 2015. You entered 45 people into your program. Have you actually looked back at the other 57 people that didn't get put in and compared the results of your outcomes from those two different groups?
No, we have not, because those clients that weren't accepted into the program did not sign a consent form, so we don't have the ability to go into either Sentry or other types of AHS data and look at sort of what has happened to them since. So that is a challenge, because it would be nice to know if we had a bit of a control group to see who came through and who didn't. And also, there was not a significant amount of evaluation work done on the original program. So while there was a small process evaluation, there were no outcome evaluations done throughout the program. And so even for myself trying to go back and learn what had been done, what the outcomes were, who the clients were, there was almost no program data. So it was a little difficult from that point of view, coming in and trying to make sense of all of it. And so that's why we're really focused on making sure that there's some good evaluation components put in now that can be measured long-term, and that will maintain consistency regardless of who is moving in and out of the program as far as staffing goes, so that we can see those outcomes, because it's unfortunate that we don't have them from the original program to know who completed programming, what that looked like, what happened for them, and looking beyond.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And you just answered my question. Was there must be something in the 7 years that you had the program running that with the 45 people, but apparently not. So anyhow, it's going better in the future. There's one more question I just wanted to ask. Maybe I'll save that though. Commissioner Dudron, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just have two quick questions. One, do you know if the similar program is in Edmonton and other cities in Alberta? Or is it just only Calgary?
The redirect is just within Calgary.
Okay, so my second question to that, if you have a youth in the program and they have to move out of Calgary, is there any kind of a mechanism in place to do kind of follow-up so that the investment doesn't just get lost midway? And if you don't have the answer, no, that's okay. But this is a pilot program, but it's something to consider into the pilot.
Yes, the goal is always to make sure that these youth are supported, whether they're part of the program or not. So as we see at intake, if they're not appropriate for the program, Stacey and Nicole do make sure that that individual is referred to another appropriate program, or they provide the parents with some resources so that they can help that young person. And moving as well, if it's known that the family is moving, say to somewhere like Edmonton, the program will certainly look into resources there and try and connect them ahead of time to make sure that there's sort of the balls aren't dropped in between there.
One more. Commissioner Ogle, please.
I guess, could we ask that a year from now you give, like I've heard a lot of discussion here about outcomes. Maybe a year from now you could tell us some outcomes because I haven't heard any. I've heard a lot of discussion about trying to catch steam in a basket is really what I see so far. So if we could endeavor that you could show us some outcomes a year from now.
Yeah, there's quite a comprehensive evaluation plan in place. So again, this first year is sort of a pilot year, but we are capturing lots of data. And then next year, I think it would be great to be able to come back and provide an update and an evaluation report on what has happened for the clients.
Further to that, perhaps, you talked about freedom of expression and not being able to sign, and they didn't sign a consent agreement, but maybe we'd like to know if out of those 105 or whatever the number is now that were touched by the justice system or the police system, where they, if that happened again, because it's that repetitive action that doesn't get handled that is a draw on resources of the service. So if I could just ask that too.
Yes, and I know for the YARD program specifically, there is something in place on the consent form that research can be done on the client if they sign off on that, and that their information can be pulled in the future to look at what has happened since they were in the program. And we'd like to have the same thing in the consent form for redirect so that we can actually follow up and do a bit of a longitudinal study and see who has been involved in the justice system from the policing side.
Commissioner Tanguay, thanks.
Thank you. It's just
Okay,
a clarification.
yeah,
It's super short.
Good.
I think you said that it's a voluntary program and parents must consent to have their child participate in the program. So if the parent does not consent, the child cannot participate. So the parent could be a problem.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Tanguay.
I'll be quick. I'm curious if you've connected with the University of Calgary AHS and the Department of Psychiatry. I find when autism was brought up several times, and I'm trying to wrap my head around, is it people who are using autism as an excuse, or is it people who truly have autism and don't understand what they're doing? Regardless, this does sound like a health concern. And knowing that you don't have a therapist or mental health clinician with you, I feel like there's an opportunity to collaborate. I also think there's an opportunity in the peer-reviewed literature to publish on this, because if it's happening here, it's happening everywhere. And I've not heard of it. So I'm curious onto where that leads. I've had many, as a physician, many people coming to me and saying, I think I have autism. And we go through a long discussion about that. But I didn't really connect that to maybe that's happening in other streams. So I think there's some big opportunities in bringing this out into the public eye, and but also in the expert eye. I'm not sure health is aware of some of this.
It's an excellent point, and we've actually begun looking into that. So one of the things we're doing, there is a practicum student that is working with the program right now, and I have tasked her with finding all of the literature she can on the relationship between autism and any sort of conflict, any kind whatsoever. And so she's been gathering some of that for me, because I think we would like to do that, is actually find a way to partner with the university, do a larger study, and it should be published on, and also consulting with other similar programs throughout the country or even in North America to see if they're seeing the same trend. Because again, this is quite anecdotal, and just this year when we've redeveloped the program, we've started asking the referral source to specify, is there an autism diagnosis, and whether or not it's confirmed or suspected or not at all. There's also some questions on the intake for the family to follow that up, just to see what they're thinking, because you're right, the spectrum is quite large, and so certain behaviors are sort of being lumped into Asperger's and neurodivergent disorders, things like that. So we definitely want to start capturing that and look at that, because I think it's quite a large component. And in the clients the team is seeing, it's very difficult to provide them with programming when their thinking is so concrete, or they're maybe not understanding the social implications of, there's one young person, I believe, who's he's quite quite fascinated by Nazis, but doesn't necessarily espouse the hate of Nazis, but will go around, I like this uniform, well, like I want an SS uniform, but isn't actually going to school hating everyone and sort of doesn't understand the separation there. So clients like that, it's quite difficult to provide them with programming. And, when there's an autism diagnosis and trying to, say, this is why this is inappropriate, but also saying like, this is why you shouldn't believe it, and just struggling with that. So
I think the practicum student's awesome. I also think there are experts here in Calgary, and it would be great to kind of connect a few dots there and kind of bring that together.
And that's what the program is doing as well as part of the partnerships, is identifying any agencies that provide autism supports or any specialists. And we're trying to engage them right now and just see how they can support the program, whether or not they'd be an appropriate referral source, and what they think the program can do to support those youth. So it's definitely on our radar. And I think we're going to see that as a larger trend as the program continues. And so you're right, there's an opportunity to sort of be a leading program in that sense when it comes to this type of conflict and the connection with autism.
Thank you very much. That's great. Lots of information there. I thank you for all the questions from commissioners. And I think there's probably something here later on, but this is one program, but there's YARD, there's MAST, and there's other, and the whole set of programs under the youth services section might be interesting sometime later in the year, or at some point that might be interesting for us to know more about the whole prevention side, because prevention's one of those pieces of the APP and the thing where we're working way harder at now in terms of moving hard. And there's lots of partnerships and such, but this whole idea of prevention and there's a whole youth services section that's focused on the kids. So that would be interesting. But thank you very much for this. It's very interesting. Some of us here are really sad there weren't metrics for the last 5 years, but that's the way things go. But thank you for your work and focus going forward on doing that. And we look forward to hearing more when you're ready to come back. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. And Nicole, who's in the room somewhere in virtual reality. There you go. Thank you. With that, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the crime update. And there are two pieces to these reports. One is from the Bureau of Investigative Support, and the second is from the Bureau of Community Policing. So I'll turn it over. We'll hear both reports, and then we'll open it up to questions. So please go ahead.
I'm just going to flip it around and go with Deputy Chief Gill first with Community Policing, and then followed up by Deputy Cook.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chair. I've got some prepared remarks that I'll speak to, Chair, and I apologize in advance. I may repeat some of the comments you made in your opening remarks. For the Bureau of Community Policing, December was a busy month for our officers who dealt with a number of high-profile incidents, including shootings and protests. Many investigations were successfully concluded, and I'll refer you to the Safe Public Spaces Snapshot for a more complete list. But here are a few of the highlights I'd like to mention. Throughout November and December, there were 24 commercial break-and enters at downtown, Chinatown, and Edmonton Trail restaurants and businesses. I'm pleased to report that on December 5th, 2 well-known offenders were arrested and are currently before the courts on multiple charges for those offenses. You may have also heard that news about a stabbing involving a security guard downtown. The guard caught a woman unlawfully entering an apartment building and gained entry into a residence through an unlocked door. The guard ultimately confronted the woman, who responded by stabbing him twice before he was able to gain control. Thankfully, he is physically okay. The woman was arrested on December 1st and faces charges for this assault, as well as breach of probation orders and 2 outstanding warrants. Further to Chair Cornett's earlier comments, as part of our commitment to maintaining public safe spaces, we began a 2-week undercover operation at the beginning of December at many C-train stations that resulted in 27 people facing 212 criminal charges, and multiple weapons were seized. The purpose was to detect and disrupt drug trafficking in these locations by arresting drug traffickers and imposing conditions of release that may deter the continuation of drug-related crimes. With the help of various teams and units within the Calgary Police Service and Transit Public Safety, we were able to successfully apprehend these individuals and hold them accountable for not only their crimes, but for putting our community at risk. Recognizing some of the vulnerable people who use transit suffer from addiction, the second phase of the operation involved providing outreach with our clinician partners from Alberta Health Services. About 10 days after this operation wrapped up, mountain bike unit officers were called for a trespassing and check on welfare complaint on a private property near Olympic Plaza. As officers approached what appeared to be an encampment and moved a tarp aside, they were confronted by several individuals with access to loaded firearms. Our officers did what they do best and were able to safely take all 5 people into custody. They seized a loaded sawed-off rifle, 3 loaded handguns with 3D printed receivers and restricted extended capacity magazines, as well as 1 prohibited switchblade style knife. These investigations demonstrate our commitment to ensuring that our public spaces remain safe for Calgarians, and while we lead with compassion and in connection to services, enforcement is also an important part of our response. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the huge effort that has gone into investigating and laying charges into the September 2nd violent clash in Falcon Ridge and Castle Ridge that resulted in more than $150,000 worth of property damage and 12 people being hospitalized with injuries. In the days after the violent conflict, we stood up an investigative task force made up of skilled investigators. Since September, this task force has spent over 750 hours reviewing CCTV footage, body-worn camera, and evidence gathered through video in order to identify persons of interest. The video evidence identified 50 individuals as having taken part in the violence. Of those, we arrested and interviewed 39 people. Those arrests resulted in 28 people being charged with 63 criminal offenses, including rioting, assault with a weapon, and possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose. We want to thank the media and Calgarians that shared information with us during this investigation. And finally, it's important for me to acknowledge the CPS members who responded to this violent, dynamic, and dangerous situation. These officers worked exceptionally hard to keep the peace and reduce the impact this conflict had on our community. And now I'll hand it over to Deputy Cook for his updates.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Chair. I'll start, and my apologies, Chair, if I repeat some of the content that you covered, but I think the Commission will agree with me. Some of these crime trends remain very topical to our community and important not only to the Commission, but I can tell you our daily efforts within this space has not changed, and the priority in and around gun violence and violent crime and crime within our public spaces has not changed. So with that, I'll start with gun violence, which was obviously of interest throughout 2023, and it continues today. As of today's date of January 31st, we are at 4 shootings in Calgary. This time last year, we were at 10 shootings, so our trend of reducing gun crime and shootings continues at 60%. The 5-year average for January is 9.6. Overall, there was 100 shootings reported in 2023, which is a 21% decline compared to 2022. However, we still remain 6% above the 5-year average in Calgary. At this point, 23 of the shootings in 2023 have been confirmed connection to organized crime, and we continue to investigate the motive of the remaining shootings. As we've reported to Commission previously, about 30% of the shootings in Calgary we attribute to organized crime. The remaining 70% are primarily addressed within Deputy Gale's Bureau. Following 6 continuous years of seeing an increase in the presence or perceived presence of a firearm, at the end of 2023, we saw a shift in this trend and recorded a 13% decrease in the presence or perceived presence of firearms used in conjunction with other crimes. Over the past several years, we have dedicated a significant amount of resources into addressing gun violence in Calgary, and this decrease has shown our collective efforts. And I have to stress, it's an organizational lift, it's an organizational effort every day to suppress the violence. We seized 429 firearms in 2023, which is down slightly from 517 in 2022, and about 444 in 2021. The prevalence of firearms within our community remains a pressing issue. We have noted several trends relating to firearms in Calgary. One of most note is we've seen a year-over-year increase in break-and enters, resulting in firearm thefts. About a 28% increase between 2021 and 2023. Has to reinforce the importance of safe storage of firearms within a residence. I'll now turn to our homicides for 2023. Our homicide unit responded and investigated 58 files. Of these files, 21 have been declared homicides, which is 6 fewer than in 2022, where we saw 27, and 3 fewer than the 5-year average, or approximately 24. As of January 15, 2024, charges have been laid in 12 of the homicides that occurred in 2023, representing a clearance rate of 57%. As we've reported to the Commission in previous years, I strongly anticipate that 57% will continue to increase as investigative files continue to progress, some remaining with efforts that take decades to get to a conclusion or to a charge. Our efforts in that space, as we've described before, I would describe as relentless. The remaining 9 unsolved homicides for 2023 were fatal shootings. While all 9 of these files remain active investigations, we believe that 3 were drug motivated and 4 were the results of a deadly confrontation. In 2022 and 2023, 56% and 57% of our homicides were caused by a shooting, thus stressing the importance of the gun violence or the need to respond to gun violence within our city. 2023 also saw the highest portion of gun-related homicides in Calgary in the history of our service, at 50% of our homicides. Offenders on conditions at the time of committing a homicide was a concerning theme in 22, and this continued in 2023. In 2022, we were over 50%, but it slowed slightly last year with 6 of 14, so 43% offenders accused of homicide being on conditions at the time of their offense. Only 1 offender in 2023 was granted bail after their arrest. This is notably lower than in 2022, with 7 of 27 accused persons, 26%, released on bail pending their trial. I'd be remiss not to thank the Chief and this Commission for the advocacy towards bail reform within this country. It's appreciated by the men and women of our service, and I believe the community we serve. I'll now turn to organized crime. As we presented to you, we have recently gone through a restructure within our organized crime section within the Calgary Police Service, and our attention within the violence that organized crime brings into our community, our efforts towards suppression, disruption, investigation, and intelligence is a daily effort across our service. In late November of 2023, we charged 1 man in relation to the kidnapping of a woman from outside her workplace in May of 2023. During the incident, the woman was held for several days inside an Airbnb rental located in Northwest Calgary. This was a targeted incident that was believed to be associated to organized crime conflict in Calgary. Although 1 man was initially charged, we believe several others conspired to commit this act of violence, and the investigation continued. In November of 2023, CPS investigators liaised with the Windsor Police to locate and arrest a 2nd man who is also believed to be involved in the kidnapping. He has since been brought back to Calgary to face charges in relation to the kidnapping. As we've described before, I think it's important to note our organized crime members and criminals, they don't have any boundaries. Therefore, we have to pursue these offenders right across Canada and internationally if required. A significant amount of resources from across the service were utilized in both responding to and investigating this file, which speaks to the evolving complexities of addressing organized crime within our community. I will not recover the ground by Deputy Gill or the Chair in relation to our drug trafficking undercover operation in support of some of the efforts within Raj's Bureau in and around safe public spaces and our enforcement efforts. The last category I will cover is in relation to robbery. Again, we had a significant trend within our cannabis store robberies through 2023. There was once again, I'll go back to our commercial bank robberies. We ended the year with only 5 financial bank robberies. However, our robbery unit worked to solve the sudden increase in cannabis store robberies in late 2023. After a long period of no robberies, during November and December, we had 12 cannabis store robberies that we have attributed to the same offenders. For context, for the total year, there were 17, and we had 14 within 2 months. As a result of the late spike, our robbery unit began an operation, and on Saturday, December 9th, 2023, 3 persons of interest were arrested in District 2. Business engagement also occurred as part of the investigative strategies undertaken in the operation. Target hardening was recommended and included locking doors and screening customers before entry. This strategy and the timely media releases have resulted in the complete halt to this trend once again. As many of you know, as part of Crime Stoppers Month, Chief Neufeld participated in the month of January. Our service partnered with Calgary Transit and the Calgary Crime Stoppers Association to unveil a wrapped Calgary Transit bus. Some notable stats. Over the past 42 years, Calgary Crime Stoppers has played a pivotal role in over 15,000 solved cases, 7,000 arrests, and over 11,000 criminal charges. Additionally, joint efforts with law enforcement have led to the seizure of $36 million in property and cash, along with approximately $362 million in confiscated drugs. Calgary Crime Stoppers remain a vital partner of our service, and we are committed to continuing the work with them to solve crime and reduce victimization in Calgary. And I think it also stresses the importance of victims reporting crime and our community participating with us in solving crime. That's my report, Chair.
Thank you very much. Lots of information there. So I'll turn it over to commissioners. Commissioner Mallon.
I have 2 questions, actually. The first is for Deputy Gill. And I'm asking this really because a lot of citizens have asked me, and I don't know the answer. So I will ask on their behalf. In something like the Falcon Ridge riot, if any of those charged are not citizens, is deportation an option? Or is that ever considered?
In terms of those charged, Commissioner, I think what we will do is work with our partners in the federal realm who look after deportation. That'd be Immigration Canada. That'd be a decision for Immigration Canada to pursue.
But that is something that is considered?
It would be by them.
Yeah, okay. And my second question is for Deputy Cook, and it doesn't really, I know we don't have an answer, but there's a perception in the community that a murder like the one that took place in front of Costello School, that there is, that the system treats domestic complaints with less concern than is needed. That somehow they figure that an EPO will keep a terrified person safe, and we know that doesn't work. So is there anything that is going on to try and improve how we protect people who are in danger from an intimate partner?
Commissioner, thank you for that important question. Regrettably, I think we know some of the limitations of, despite all of our efforts with community partners, domestic violence remains a pervasive issue within our community. And I can tell you, like through risk assessments, threat assessments, enforcement, arrests, I think the people that are in this space with not only law enforcement, but our community partners do everything possible to keep the courageous victims safe as they report this crime. I don't have a good answer for you. I wish we didn't have domestic violence victims and homicides. We had 3 of our homicides last year as a result of domestic violence. I guess the strength of an emergency protection order is really only at the strength that it's written on a piece of paper. These are individual criminal acts that are acted upon and decided by a specific individual. It's regrettable, and I don't know how better to answer that question, Commissioner.
So there was a call for a provincial review. Is that likely to happen?
Thanks. I'll take that one, Commissioner, because I was just going to tack on to what Paul was saying. I tried to address this one day with the media, and it's a longer discussion than I think you can answer in a short period of time. But I would say that I think every effort's made to treat domestic offenses as seriously as possible, including, like Paul talked about, the partnerships that we have to assess risk on it, reviewing every file that comes in, and all the extra work that's done by police officers on the front end when there is a domestic conflict related call. The challenge is trying to predict the unpredictable. And so in some cases, and the example I used with the media was, if we're talking about bail, for example, with an organized crime offender where there's a long record and there's a history of, there's weapons, we've seized guns and drugs, and there's commercialization, and there's a history of violence. When somebody has to look at that, a judge or justice is looking at, questions like bail. Bail's never easy, but I think that's an easier situation to look at. When it comes to domestic offenses, some of the ones that lead to subsequent serious violence or homicides don't have those hallmarks. So when you talk about the number of cases, like I think we're well above 5,000 domestic conflict type files that we address here in Calgary each year. Am I right with those numbers, Paul? So there's a lot of these types of calls, and in each of these cases, this work is done. But sometimes you don't have a history of violence, you don't have all of this history. There's a risk assessment that's done, and regrettably, in some cases, it's wrong. And so when the judges and justices look at EPOs and emergency protection orders and they think that this would be something that would work, I mean, it actually does work in many cases, and we don't hear about that. It's like when the planes take off and land, we don't hear about when they do work, but we hear about everyone that doesn't. So very, very complicated area, but I think they're taken very seriously, but I think it's an imperfect system no matter how you look at it, but a lot of good work done.
Is there a need, do you think, for some kind of more specialized forensic risk assessment of some of these people, especially when there's multiple charges? Like this individual had a whole pile of things already against him, and the victim did not feel safe already. So is that, I'm just trying to think of what as a community we should be advocating for, because we just keep hearing this stuff. And I mean, I was one of the people who set up the first women's shelter in this city, and that's like 1974. And we've done a lot, but people are still dying, and this one was horrible, right? Yeah. And I just trying to think of, maybe it's better risk assessment at the point of the second charge or something.
Work certainly continues in that regard, and I know that we've looked at internationally at a number of different risk assessment tools. Those have been studied as well in cases we talked about before where there has been subsequent violence or homicides, to look and see, did the risk assessment pick this up or was it a failure in the system? Going back to your earlier question, the reason why we called for the review is because it seems like when these horrible situations happen, initially there's a very cursory look by community sometimes saying, well, could the police have done something different, or could the judge or justice who looked at bail have done something different? But I think there really needs to be a holistic look at every opportunity that there would have been to be able to screen or connect people with resources as they go through, looking broader than just one aspect of the system, because a lot of times there are opportunities that are missed. And I know the Family Violence Death Review Committee is a multidisciplinary committee that looks at the whole system.
Is that going to happen?
It should happen.
Don't know yet.
Yeah, what I would say is, in all likelihood, yes, this is the exact type of file they would look at, but they will screen and decide whether this one goes in. So we will call for that. We have called for that. My expectation would be that it would happen, but we don't know that yet for sure. But I'm quite confident that it will.
There was some people who's in the business who suggested to me that shelters should be built for the perpetrators and leave everybody else in the community. Maybe we just reverse who we're locking away.
Yeah, a very, very significant.
Yeah, right.
Very
Thank
significant
you.
challenge. Thank you for the question.
Commissioner Campbell, and then Commissioner Hope and Shireen Nyson-Jordan.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think there is probably one thing we can do, and it is change the way we talk about domestic violence. So I'll note that for the two reports in the crime update, neither of them report on domestic violence and intimate partner violence, unless that's what sexual offenses are categorized. Nope. Okay, so let's put those 5,000 domestic violence and intimate partner violence statistics in those reports. One of them, when we have 3 homicides in 2003 that are related to domestic violence, let's point that out. If we're using words like targeted to reflect intimate or domestic, why not just say intimate and domestic violence? When I think about targeted incident, that's typically the language that we use when it's a gang shooting or organized crime. And we're trying to assuage the public. This was not that. This was a femicide on the sidewalk in front of an elementary school. There was nothing to calm the public down about. Women have always known the risk. We live with it daily. So let's just say intimate partner violence. This was a moment to alert us to the presence of intimate partner violence and domestic violence risk in our community every day. We know those tragic outcomes. A woman dies from intimate partner violence every 6 days in Canada. And we miss the opportunity to say that in our press release and in our conference. And I recognize that there was a tragedy and it was a lot for CPS to communicate to the community, and they were doing their best. But I think we can change how we talk about it and how we communicate it. And that's maybe one thing that we can do.
Commissioner, if I could, thank you for your comments. Again, I'm very conscious. I try to be very conscious and respectful of the language I use, not only in my day-to-day life, but in my professional life, because I think language is very, very important. If I used the word targeted, I apologize. I'm not sure I did, but if I did, it's inappropriate. I have, on numerous occasions in front of this commission, reported on our efforts within the domestic violence space, including a fulsome presentation in 2023 by our unit that walked through not only the risk assessment tools, the partnerships, the multidisciplinary approach, stats, the report, the trend. Commissioner, if that's a direction from the chair and the executive director, it can be a standing item within my report every month. And if there's a need to bring back subject matter experts into this important community conversation, we would welcome that opportunity. So thank you for your comments.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we can think about whether did I turn it off when I was speaking halfway through? My finger got fly on itself. Black woman, that's what happens. Finger gets away from you. I think it would be valuable to have domestic violence and intimate partner violence reported regularly. So if we as a commission can provide that direction to CPS, I would appreciate that. And we could figure out how best to do that and communicate that perhaps through the EXO. And thank you for that. I think it's a cultural change on how we speak about it.
Thank you. And we'll take that under advisement, discuss that, and make sure that we let you know. Okay, thank you. I have a number of people to speak, and I just want to caution that we have another report before we end this section. So just, oh, sorry, I'm not close enough here. I have a number of people in line to speak to these reports, and we have one more report before we finish this item in the next few minutes. Not few minutes, we got half an hour, but we don't want it to be too long. So if we can be succinct, I'll go to Commissioner Hope to start.
Thank you, Chair, and I will be succinct. It's just one question, either for Deputy Cook or Deputy Gill. It's in relation to the prevalence, obviously, of firearms in relation to homicide. I think you spoke about the 28% increase in firearms being stolen from homes or residents at least. And so I'm just curious, from the linking it with other measures that we're taking, what are the preventative steps that will be taken to prevent those firearms, or at least inform enforce, if necessary, those gun owners who may be storing firearms unsafely, that has now a knock-on effect of those arms being stolen and then being used in homicides?
Thank you, sir, for the question. There are, with partners through our National Weapons Enforcement Support Team with the RCMP, there are lots of preventative education programs that are available within the community. A part of the licensing acquisition for firearms is a very robust owner responsibility around safe storage of a firearm. So I think those things are taking place. The vast majority, not vast, a large portion of our crime guns are sourced through break-and enters. We are seeing an increase in smuggled guns into the country, which is primarily an Eastern Ontario phenomenon, but we are starting to see an increase in Alberta. But the most of our crime guns in Calgary are more or less locally sourced, primarily through break-and enters.
Appreciate that. And just a follow-up question is, are we seeing those residents who are responsible for irresponsible storage being charged?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Tanguay. Then Nyson Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Deputies Gill and Cook, thank you for your reports. This is actually for both of you. I'm curious, you know, the district drug and firearm seizure, there's a mention in the paragraph about $73,000 worth of drugs that were confiscated. Also in the Deputy Cook's report, we kind of zipped over drug trafficking and the Dust project. I'm just curious, with the Dust, what was the demographic of the 27 individuals that were arrested? Are these individuals that are also living rough, or are these individuals that are taking advantage of those living rough? Do we know? And how much drugs and value were seized during the operation, which also wasn't listed?
Thanks, Commissioner. While Deputy Cook looks to see if we have the dollar value, I don't have that in front of me in my material, but we can certainly get that information to you in terms of street value. In terms of who are the offenders, are they living rough? Without having individualized the 27, I believe it's a combination of some that are, but some that are part of an organized crime group. So they are repeat offenders. They are rarely individuals that we deal with the first time.
We can certainly report back to the executive director, but I don't have the exact quantities of the drugs seized, but we can do that for you. And the demographics I don't have either, other than how it was described by Deputy Gill.
Just to follow up, there's a mention twice about the outreach efforts to provide supports to vulnerable individuals, including addiction supports. Where are those supports going? So for instance, in Edmonton, a lot of use of the virtual opioid dependency program, initiating people sometimes in the back of a police car, remand, wherever. You know, again, I have some internal knowledge of this, but at the RAM clinic, we're not seeing any of these referrals. I don't know where these individuals are going. These vulnerable individuals who are suffering with addiction, where are we taking them?
Commissioner, in the short term, when we look at encampments or we look at dealing with individuals who are suffering from addiction, we work with our partners, and the primary three partners that we work with are Alpha House, the Drop-In Center, and the Alex, or the three. And when you talk about the Alex it brings in other partners such as AHS and addictions counseling and other various community partners and resources that are available to work with them. So rarely do the police do this alone. We're doing it with our community partners, and then we're allowing the expertise of our community partners to direct to the other partners that are available depending on the needs of that individual.
Has there been any work to try to figure out, it's one thing just to say, hey, we've got a community partner and now we're passing that on to them. It's another to say, hey, what are the outcomes? We've talked about outcomes quite a bit here today. What are the outcomes of that? Is it actually working? Or are we just deferring and saying, sorry, now that one's on you, which you guys are usually the brunt of the it's on you piece. But it would be curious just to see the kind of outcomes of these individuals and what it's looking at, especially knowing that there are other services that are publishing on outcomes and looking at outcome data and utilizing AHS services. It'd just be great to kind of see that.
I probably don't have a good answer for you. I think within Deputy McClellan's bureau, we can probably circle back on this. I do recall last year, though, when you're talking about outcomes, some was anecdotal, but we have had presentations with our drug treatment court and the clients through the drug treatment court and the treatment that they receive through various partners within that space, where I think we are achieving the right outcomes. And that was described not based upon what I'm telling you, it was based upon a specific client that came into commission and described how drug treatment court changed and saved his life. But that, again, it would be another presentation if there was interest with the chief and the executive director and XO. I'm sure we can bring it back.
I have all the love in the world for drug treatment court. That's not what I'm interested in. I think really knowing we go into an encampment, which I think the commission fully supports the work that you're doing and the de-escalation incredible story. I would just like to know what happens to those individuals. Rather than just saying we pass that on, I would like to know what that looks like and where they go. And certainly there's many conversations on the health side as what's happening, and a lot of colleagues and look, dinner table conversations. What is happening? We see the news, we see an encampment, we see it ripped up. What happens? And sometimes the media paints it difficult. So.
If I can jump in, though, I think, because I know Commissioner Wong and Shuri also, but I do think it's something that we want to ask, but all of this work that you're doing around encampments is a city issue. It's not the services issue. It's a full city issue, because the partners that go in with our fire, EMS, and all of the other social partners, et cetera. So it would be interesting for us to think about how we then ask this question of the city as a whole, because it's the whole system that needs to be thinking about how to track and respond to these things. And I just want to make sure that we don't end up with the service trying to, again, take on the world when we're actually making good progress over the last couple of years of getting some good partners in with the service who need to take on those responsibilities. So it's worth further discussion for the commission. I don't know if maybe it's a committee or some other time, but I don't know if either of the councillors want to jump in on this, but I really am quite strongly advocating that we need to talk to the city about how we manage this as a system. And I don't know if that's through the full anti-racism and all the things that are going on in that area, or I don't know who that is, but I don't think it's the service right yet to try and do that evaluation. So
maybe a super quick observation, though, just to Commissioner Tangay's point. I'm also similarly concerned, though, that with the investments that have been brought in across the system, people can be screened by police in cells. They can be screened at the DI. We've got PACT, we've got DPACT, we've got folks from the 50 officer grant that are going to be working in downtown. So there needs to be a coordination of all of this as well. One of the things that we have learned, and I don't know, Catherine, not to put you on the spot, but I know your team's been put on to sort of look at the sharing of information back and forth so that we could sort of track in a case management way, especially with our people who are high flyers or high systems users, how they are tracking through the system. We know that recovery won't be a direct line. And so how is it when they come into contact with different parts of the system? Is there an opportunity to be able to share information so that we can actually pick up where we left off, or at least where we were, so it's not always starting over? So I think part of it with the investments that are happening is to coordinate people through that system. And I know that we've been advocating to the government as we get deeper into this work, we're recognizing some barriers, and we've made representations around them. So.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I mean, I think that what we're trying to move towards is a system where we're trying to manage and support people instead of focusing solely on transactional crime. So we will respond to that crime, but then the follow-up is about the person, right? And that involves a certain amount of information sharing with our partners. For the Reach Up YYC work we are looking at kind of that case management approach, and where that person consents, once they've been referred to support services or community services, we will be able to follow up and understand as a table of partners and start to collect some of that data. So early stages. We're also partnering with folks at arrest processing, actually, which is in development, so that there can be some of that diversion right there upon arrest, again, with consent, because this is, medical treatment and social supports. But it's very important that you get it at the different junctures, both at the outset and then coming back once the referral's been made to partners. We don't need the specifics necessarily, but it's nice to track if in fact there was follow-up. Did it proceed past that initial contact? What was the longer term outcome? So very much on the same page. It's just kind of things that we're working through within the structure that we currently have.
And I think that was my question. With all due respect, I think we are part of the system and we should understand the system and not be stuck with I don't know. And if we say I don't know, that means we have a problem. We got to figure it out. So thank you, Chief, for your answer, and deputies, I appreciate it.
And if you don't mind, Commissioner, just one final comment on that. We are having a presentation next month at Commission on a lot of our programs, as Catherine just mentioned. But if you'll recall our last presentation, we always talked about the work that we're going to undertake now with the 50 officer grant of establishing high system users unit. And that's where we're going to work with a lot of our partners, Crown, so Crown Council, probation, in terms of the downstream effects of all the individuals that we deal with, sometimes through criminal charges or arrests. We're the first pointy end of the stick that deal with them, but we need to work with that whole systems approach. So from a criminal justice system, working in collaboration. So a lot of the work that our high system users team will do over the course of this year, once we get them up and running here in March, we'll go to a lot of we'll go to some of the questions that you spoke to. And then, like I said, we have a presentation next month as well.
Thank you. And really good discussion. Thank you very much. And I'm going to move on to Commissioner Nyson-Jordan and then Commissioner Wong.
Thanks. Mine is going back to the domestic violence component. And this is really an investigative question from my perspective. The discussion about coercive control and having it added to the criminal code. Given our advocacy for the bail reform, is there any benefit for us to kind of do some advocacy in that particular area? Because I sense the frustration and certainly have viewed the frustration. I can't do anything more in this situation. We should have something. So is that something that you're contemplating either with the police chiefs of the province, and is this something that we should be considering as advocating for at the federal level?
I think for sure the advocacy is important, and that continued advocacy. And I think this space is the more people and the more involvement we can have into domestic violence, I think the community will benefit. So I think the advocacy towards intimate partner violence, coercive behavior within the criminal code is, I think, without question, worthy of merit.
Thank you. And Commissioner Wong. Sorry.
Thank you. Two questions. One was in your report here. We're referring to the downtown encampment where you uncovered guns and a few other things there. The question is not so much about that, but more in a broader sense of when you uncover encampments, are we finding more and more encampments with weapons as such? And what are the sources of these weapons?
Yeah, I would say the answer to that is yes. Most of the weapons are not of the caliber, no pun intended, with the finding the firearms like the case that was spoken about. But I think what we see is that when individuals are sleeping rough and they're staying in that type of environment, there's certain vulnerabilities that creates. So a lot of the weapons that we see coming out will be a lot more rudimentary. They will be knives, they will be axes, this type of thing. We put out a number of media releases around that when they do come out so that people can see what comes out of the encampments as well. But I would just suggest that it's not overly sophisticated. A lot of it, the vast majority of it would be less sophisticated. It won't be firearms and that type of thing. That's more rare.
And they're generally sourced by break and enters type things as such.
Yeah, I would say it can be sourced that way. In other cases, it's knives that people have picked up along the way. Some of them super intimidating though, like we're talking about machetes and things that are, go beyond just a pocket knife. That's not what we're talking about. But these things, as you know, can be purchased these days in, like I'll say variety stores, for lack of a better term. Like if you walk around downtown, you can find places where you can walk in and you can buy these sorts of things. So they're fairly common for people to carry. And this was one of the challenges that we saw when we talk about the high intensity drug trafficking investigations that were done on transit. We'll generally see that people that are carrying drugs and cash because they're selling, even if the quantities are not significant, they will be carrying those type of weapons for personal protection and this type of thing. So there's been an increase in the number of weapons that are being carried on the street, and that's leading to some of the violence that we're seeing.
Thank you, Chief. You may recall a couple of years ago when you came to council and I asked a similar question, and that is there are a number of commercial retail outlets selling these, low impact, whatever you want to call them, type weapons. And the question I asked was at that time, is there a way that we can, through either a licensing system or whatever, or some way to survey the sale of these to certain types of individuals so you can have better intelligence where these weapons are going to?
It's interesting and perhaps something we should be looking at, because I think the other thing that we could add to that discussion is bear spray or dog spray type thing. We're seeing that as well as those blunt force weapons and edge weapons in encampments and places like that. So again, we're getting people that are clearly vulnerable coming in, purchasing these types of things, bear spray, and they're not headed to Banff hiking. And so inevitably these things are actually being deployed in the malls and in transit and onto other people. And so it is certainly a problem and something that we would support a discussion about. May be worth certainly looking at.
Okay. The other question is, we had an opportunity to tour as Commission District 1 and the forensics unit. And, I think it was an eye opener to see what is being done there, the number of squads or units you've got. And the quantity of squads is one thing, but the actual number that were available for deployment and the percentage, I think it was quoted that of the number of break and enters, only 15% of them have forensics examination of that. How do we square the circle there so that we actually are, digging for the evidence so that you can actually prosecute?
Others might be able to add to this, but I would just say when it comes to break and enters and looking at for forensic evidence there, a lot of times investigators will look at the point of entry. They'll focus around points of entry, whether it be windows or areas where they know that individuals responsible would have touched. Sometimes, depending on the location, those surfaces are heavily touched or dirty, haven't been cleaned for a long time. There's lots of fingerprints, for example. So there will be some significant challenges in trying to get forensic evidence in terms of fingerprints. The other thing is lots of times we'll find somebody may cut themselves on a door or a window when they go through, and there may be blood, but for a regular break and enter, and I don't want to say a regular break and enter, but because that's a big deal to people, obviously, but if it's a break and enter with no violence or anything like that, you can imagine if we collected that blood and then submitted it to the lab, the RCMP lab, and then competed for those analysis with other more violent crimes and homicides and this type of thing, it will be months and months and months. So lots of times for break and enters, break-ins to vehicles and this type of thing, those forensic examples right now or samples aren't collected and submitted because what they would do is gum up the system for more serious cases to move through more expeditiously. So I don't think the issue is a lack of digging. I think the issue is probably more a lack of capacity on processing those forensic samples when they're submitted to the lab.
Okay, I guess sorry, just to dig it over, and this is my last question on this. As I understand, there's a allocation of number of units and officers there, but the actual availability to deploy for a variety, workforce issues or leave issues, I think that was the question more than anything else. Is there a way to overcome that challenge? Thank you.
It's a conversation that we had as recently as today. We're at about 50% 50% staffing within that unit, and that's just the harsh reality. There's some staffing efforts that we're doing with HR and across the bureaus to try to get resources in, but it's not as simple as just identifying a member. As you know, there's extensive training that can take upwards of 18 months. There's apprenticeship periods of time. So it is an area that, if fully staffed, I think we have appropriate resources. We're not at that point right now, but we're working towards it. Everything from the staff sergeant all the way down to the constables within that area. And we're also looking at restructuring in and around, is there a need for a sworn officer, or could we look for other models in and around civilianization of some of the positions in there? That work is ongoing with support with Deputy Toffick's Bureau from Strategic Services. Best practices really we're looking at across the country.
Thank you, and thank you for those two reports and the conversation that came around. When we get to the end of this section, we'll look at what motions we have to pass. And I will move on then to the last one, which is the Anti-Racism Action Plan update, and I'll pass that over to the service.
And right over to Inspector Martin. Thanks, Al.
So thank you, Chief. I was remiss to thank Commission and Council members earlier for having me, so I'll take this opportunity to do that. So thank you for having me here today. And I'll start with a couple of updates, and first with our Racial Equity Office. Our external Anti-Racism Action Committee and our new committee members as well. So on January 23rd, our service hosted our first external, I'm just gonna use the acronym ARAC, meeting for 2024. We welcomed 12 new committee members with diverse lived professional and academic experience. And this year we will have 18 members on the committee, including 4 members returning from our original committee. So we're really excited to have them on board. They were welcomed and onboarded and introduced to Chief and the deputies, and the meeting was quite a success. So the Racial Equity Office, in collaboration with our strategic services, reviewed the 107 recommendations outlined in the 2024 Ontario Human Rights Commission report on its inquiry into anti-Black racism by the Toronto Police Service. We did a robust review, and out of the 107 recommendations, 89 were applicable to CPS, 47 of which the CPS has practices in place currently or in development, and 42 of which require further exploration. Our team this month, also in partnership with Corporate Data and Analytics Unit, met with Peel Regional Police to discuss their race and identity-based data strategy in partnership with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. So these discussions included collections around the use and dissemination of race-based data and training of their members. A high-level report of our CPS preliminary findings will be presented in the upcoming months, and Rebecca Davidson is here, who leads that work for our service. Our Indigenous Relations team, including our Indigenous community mobilizers, facilitated a purification ceremony and blessing on January 9th with Elder Clarence Wolfleg and his son at our CPS Forensic Crime Scene Unit. Elder Wolfleg gifted each member a medicine pouch after the blessing and ceremony with the intent of adding layers of protection to our members whose workload is significantly traumatic investigating scenes. So this meaningful ceremony and event honoring traditional ceremonies and teachings was well received by our crime scenes unit, and 2 additional sections within CPS have requested the same ceremony. Last Thursday, our members of our ELT SLT were honored to participate in a sweat ceremony with Elder Hal Eagletailor at Satena. Elder Eagletail previously invited our CPS members to attend his sweat lodge, and we are grateful to have this invitation to experience the significance of ceremony, tradition, and custom for our ELT SLT members. And I'll start here with some work around our diversity resource team. So our DRT team ended 2023 with our Super Board meeting on December 6th. We learned that a concern from some board members was the lack of communication with respect to high-profile incidents, particularly in the Black community. So as a result, and with the guidance of our community mobilizers, we are working with our boards and committees to optimize timely, relevant, and responsible communication between CPS, all of our advisory boards, committees, and the community. We know there are many tensions in the community and questions on the effectiveness of police response to the protests. We have been strategic in responding by deliberately investing in proactive community engagement activities with the Muslim community. So this includes the Muslim Student Association at the University of Calgary. We have participated in state conferences and Mount Royal University as well. We've conducted walkthroughs and visits to the Islamic charter school system to meet with students and faculty and parents. And additionally, in Deputy Gill's area, a dedicated investigative team has been stood up to investigate all complaints stemming from protest-related complaints, so that these incidents can be investigated objectively and expeditiously. And finally, members of the CPS Diversity Resource Team are working with their counterparts at the RCMP to host an event for leaders in faith and civic sectors of the Muslim community in mid-February to identify any vulnerabilities and concerns that the diverse communities may have. So I'll move on to our community mobilizers. They are in the process of building their 2024 strategic roadmap to ensure that the work delivers on community and CPS priorities. They have initiated approximately 37 projects and activities for the month of December, including facilitating meetings with the South Sudanese community, the Ethiopian, Uganda, Japanese communities, and community partners such as Spanish Art Society and the Gateway to Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Hub, all to better understand how CPS can provide equitable service delivery to all Calgarians. And on January 27th, members of the community mobilizers hosted approximately 120 African youth at the Youth in Calgary Police Interpretive Center for a tour of the center and a presentation tailored towards guns and gangs prevention. The event was well received, and we plan to continue future engagement with the greater Black community as we head into Black History Month tomorrow. I'll talk a little bit about our hate crime prevention team. So our hate crime prevention team continues to collaborate with external partners to help increase awareness and reporting of hate-motivated crimes and incidences. These partnerships include Calgary Transit, Calgary Bylaw, Satana Nation Police, and the RCMP. And so in 2023, the team reviewed 334 potential hate-motivated files. And of those, 111 files were determined to be hate-motivated crimes, 127 were deemed hate-motivated incidents, and 88 files were determined to have no hate or bias motivation. 8 still remain under review. The team has also continued with outreach and education and conducted about 172 presentations in 2023 with over 5,000 attendees. And so far this year, the team has conducted 37 presentations. And then lastly, I'll talk about our crime prevention team and the coordinated safety response team. So thanks to the partners at the city, we have confirmed 2 CPS members to supplement the coordinated safety response team. This is the work to address any problem or derelict problem properties within the city of Calgary that impact public safety and generate numerous calls for service for Calgarians and the Calgary Police Service. So in 2023, the team has monitored approximately 560 properties that have been demolished and over 30 demolished properties as well. So we're just working through our HR processes to ensure that we put out an expression of interest to hire 2 full-time CPS employees. And Chair, that is the completion of my report.
Thank you. That's anti-racism. That's a huge breadth of work. So thank you. And you went really fast. But we have the report. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for highlighting. So I will turn it to commission members for questions. And Commissioner Siddiqui is first.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Inspector Martin. That is a lot of work you're doing. So thank you to you and your team. I actually just wanted to thank you for your comments around meeting with the Muslim community. I met with a few members a couple of weeks ago, and they had a lot of concerns around the service and not being able to access resources and information. And so I appreciate the fact that you're doing that leaders group and bringing people together. Just one request, could you let us know? Because I would love to attend that, please, if possible. And then the other sort of the question I had was, Deputy Gill, in terms of that team that you've put together to do investigations around the protests, will they do outreach as well? So is it sort of a dual role, or is it only they're doing the investigations? And are they the same people who will stick with the investigation from the minute it starts till the minute it's completed?
So that investigative team who works out of our memes, our major events section. The outreach is actually done in collaboration with Deputy McClellan's team. We have the Indigenous Relations teams, we have the Diversity Resource teams. So they're really the front individuals, but supported by the memes team that Avril Martin just spoke about. So they work in collaboration. We have the investigative response. They're also working with the protest organizers and the community groups, but also the teams that I just mentioned in Deputy McClellan's bureau. And it's a two-part. One is on the investigative side, is for any criminality, but there's also a continuous learning. As every protest is different, that team really looks at continuous improvement and how every protest that we manage, what could we have done differently? And I think last year was a prime example where every protest was unique and we learned from it, and we employed those new learnings to the following weekend, and we achieved more favorable results.
I appreciate that. Does the investigator stay with the sort of that investigation the whole time, or does it some people come and go? Because these can be very sort of personal type of things.
At this point, we're intending to keep the investigative team together, and so they will keep that investigation from start to finish.
Okay, thank you. And then just the last comment again, Inspector, I appreciate the fact that you're partnering with RCMP and other partners, because it's great to bring groups together versus, you know, doing the work on our own. So I think collaboration is great to see. Thank you.
Commissioner Nyson-Jordan.
I'll waive mine.
Commissioner Campbell.
Thanks very much, Chair. Inspector Martin, thank you so much for an extensive report and the work, and for acknowledging Black History Month starting tomorrow, because I know how busy I become and I know how busy you become personally. So your work, I would say, grows exponentially for the 29 days. So thank you for that. I have two questions. One around the hate crime prevention team update and the review of the 283 files. Do you feel that there's an underreporting of hate crimes in Calgary? And if so, do you have an estimate of what you think the number is?
So thank you, Commissioner Campbell, for the question. I did have a conversation with Constable Matt Messenger. He's our hate crimes investigator and SME. And the reporting is actually consistent from year to year. And in 2023, it has risen a little bit around the protests, I would suggest, obviously because of the geopolitical things that are happening and then the impact here. Is there an underreporting? I would suggest that there is. That's why we're having a report hate campaign, to make sure that we are knowledgeable about what a hate crime is, what a hate incident is, and then opening up avenues, right, for people to report. Not just in person, but obviously online avenues as well is coming, so that we can increase that awareness and increase that reporting stats for sure. And to your second question,
I haven't asked it yet.
Okay, go ahead. I'm just jumping ahead. Go ahead.
You're on it. So again, thank you for the reviewing the Ontario Human Rights Report on anti-Black racism. It was a big one, and I'm really appreciative that CPS has read and considered the 107 recommendations from that report in the absence of having a similar report from Alberta. One set of the recommendations deals with the use of artificial intelligence in policing. I believe it's recommendations 20, 21, and 22, if I recall. One concern, of course, is the unreliable nature of facial recognition technology, particularly in the case of racialized people and women. What deployment of generative AI tools is currently in use in CPS at this time?
I might have to defer to the chief on that, yeah. As far as the AI pieces and the tools we have.
I don't know the software. I believe it's NeoFace, but don't quote me on that. I can confirm for you. But we only use our facial recognition against known database through the Identification of Criminals Act within our holdings of people who are being charged. We do not go into open source, scrape internet in and around AI and facial recognition. That years ago went through the Privacy Commissioner, and we have not deviated from that practice, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's probably a larger conversation to have on AI, generative AI, and considering the really great success we've had with body-worn camera data, how we manage that. And I can see all of my friends in data, particularly Ms. Davidson back there, nodding. So again, maybe another opportunity for a larger conversation with Commission, not an urgent one, but an important one that we need to think about how to structure and schedule. But I think we need to have a conversation on AI.
And Commissioner Campbell, just from a strategic perspective, just a reminder, because I think the Commission's aware, but Executive Director Dyer stood up a technology ethics committee alongside the work that he's doing, and that's an internal and external committee. There's folks from the university and that type of thing on that, looking at exactly those types of issues. So that's one of the issues they look at there as well. So you'll hear a little bit more about facial rec and stuff in the closed portion of the meeting here as well. But I think it is something to flag going forward. It's very much, it's a fast emerging technology, and it's certainly, there's lots of issues around it. And so we're aware, and we've got a couple of systems build-ins there to make sure that we're proceeding cautiously, but also smartly around it.
Appreciate that. Thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
Commissioner Wong.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Inspector Martin. Two questions, one of which is a question forwarded to me by the City of Calgary's Managing Leader, Anti-Racism. We appointed her a couple of years ago, and she obviously does work for us within the city. What's the relationship between that office, your work, as well as the Commission's committee?
So thank you, Councillor Wong. It's an excellent question, and we get it all the time. How are we collaborating with the city, with the province? And in fact, we are aligned with the City of Calgary Anti-Racism Program. We have a strategic planning session actually that's coming together in March for a half a day, just to make sure that we are aligning our pillars with their pillars. Sort of an environmental scan of what resources and tools we can share together so we're not reinventing the wheel, and then how we can more strategically align both our anti-racism action committee, right, and the city's anti-racism action committee. So that is actually in the works.
Okay. And just a sidebar comment on this. There's some concerns that it may not have been regular enough, so I'm glad this is happening. Okay, the second question, as you know, we're entering Lunar New Year celebrations, Southeast communities, and I'm sure throughout the years there's many other cultural celebrations. Is it a proactive or reactive protocol to participate in their activities? Meaning, do you go searching for them or wait for invitations?
We go searching for them. Absolutely. And that's the purpose of having our community mobilizers mesh up and marry up with our diversity resource team, which has been around for, you know, a very long time. And so the purpose of the mobilizers is to bridge that gap, go out, be proactive, make those relationships, and bring the relationships back. So we have done that. We have been invited to celebrate Chinese New Year. We are actively involved with the Chinese community as well through our mobilizers and through our diversity team. So it's a matter of, we have great relations, and we had them for years through our advisory board. So it is absolutely a proactive relationship that we have.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to extend an invitation to Commission and Service. We are organizing a Lunar New Year event, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for this section? Seeing none, then we have some motions then to put forward for this section before we move on to the commission reports. Yep, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't close enough to the mic. There are a number of them, and they're up on the screen, and I want to just make sure that we're in agreement that these are motions for actions that we want. And I will tell you, there is no way I can read that font from this distance. So, sorry, I know. Oh my God, all right, that I can read. All right, that's perfect. So the first one is with respect to redirect. And so I'm going, what we're trying to do is be a little bit more disciplined with the motions and the work that we're requesting from the service. And so I'll just do a little bit of clarification for each one of these to ensure that it's either something that needs to be added or something that you already have planned for future reports and already included it somewhere. So bear with me a little bit as we get this little bit of an adjustment to our system. So the first one was in 5.2 with respect to redirect. So moved and second to accept the report and direct the service to return to the commission a report with statistics in a year from now on the redirect program. So that's with respect to the evaluation, the metrics that you've got. And so whether it needs to be a year or a year and 1 month or whatever that is, but to bring it back in roughly a year. So I will ask for, I think that one's pretty straightforward, pretty clear, someone to move that. So Commissioner Siddiqui, a second, Commissioner Mallon. And any comment from the service with respect to this? No? Does that sound reasonable? Okay,
Yeah, it
all
does.
right. Then any, those in agreement with this motion? And all are in favor, so that is passed. Thank you. The second one in 5.3, move and second to accept the report and direct the service and staff to connect on how to provide monthly updates on domestic violence statistics to the commission. And this was another one that there seemed to be general agreement and acceptance by the service. This was a reasonable inclusion to the reporting. So I'll ask for someone to move that. Commissioner Campbell, second, Commissioner Ogle. And I'll ask for any comments from the service.
Just a quick one. I would say I support the motion. Just so you know, we're moving to an online data portal that will actually have this available online. So it may negate the need for reporting going forward, but let's just burn that bridge when we get to it.
Okay.
Or cross it, maybe. Let's just cross that.
Excellent. All right, great. Good, and thank you for that clarification. And so I'll ask commissioners, those who are in favor of this motion. Seeing a unanimous consent. So thank you very much. And the second part to this, there was a question about the value of the street drugs that were seized in the dust operations. And I will ask if there's, is this a motion to bring this back? Is this something that's required, or is this just a number that you already have available? Is there? Okay, just information briefing note. Okay, so we don't need a motion on this to bring this back specifically, if it can come back. Would not bring it back to the meeting, if you can just email us a note if you have that information.
I thought the more interesting piece might be the demographics of who was arrested there. So maybe we could include that too, because I wouldn't mind seeing that either.
Okay, so maybe we'll adjust that motion to bring back not just the value, but a briefing note with respect to the dust operation.
And just to be clear, Chair, I think what you're looking for is not dust operations generally, but just the high intensity, the transit related ones. I think that's probably more interesting in terms of who's involved and that type of thing.
Okay.
Because there's ongoing dust operations. So I just want to make sure that we're
It's
not
not just the one. Okay. All right. So we have the motion amended to say with respect to high intensity transit related. And is that something that you can bring back next month, or is that something in a few months? Next month? Okay, excellent. So next month, February. And will that come to full commission, or do you want it to a committee? I'm asking commissioners, I guess.
I'd like to see it, so I don't know.
Can see it, right?
Yeah, probably the whole committee might be.
General? Full committee? Okay, I'm seeing consensus on full committee, so back to the full committee, so this time next month. Okay, All right, so we have a mover for that. Did I do that already? No, a mover. So Commissioner Ogle, seconder, Commissioner Hope, and commissioners in favor. And all are in favor, passed unanimously. And the last motion for this section, move and second to direct the service to come back at some point with a report on collection of statistics of the long-term outcomes of the encampments. So, discussion.
I don't know, again, if this is necessary either, rather than, I think, for us to be thinking kind of high level, systematically, who we're working with, what does it look like, who are we funding, and what are the expectations of that funding for, rather than emotion. I think just kind of, I don't know, we can maybe discuss this further internally and kind of figure out what we want to do.
Thanks, Commissioner Weinis.
Yeah, I think this is a takeaway because it's overlapping, I think, with the city as well. And so we're getting them to do work that is actually happening at the municipal level. And maybe the city can do a better job communicating where we are at publicly to citizens rather than putting this on officers.
Okay. Good. Does that make sense? So we won't pass a motion for this at this point. We will see whether, yeah. We did the domestic violence. Yeah, that one was done. Okay. And then the last one is that we need to move and accept the anti-racism action update. Commissioner Siddiqui and Commissioner Mallon. Commissioners in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So thank you. We're just we're aiming for clarity on what the requests are and where they come and where they go and that sort of thing. So thank you for your patience on that. So with that, we'll move on to the commission reports. There is an executive director's report. It's a written report. We're not going to do verbal presentations on this. So I'll ask if the commissioners have any questions for the executive director and for the policing summit reports. Any questions, discussions? No? All right, thank you. And then the representative updates, agenda item 7. And again, there are a number in there. Are there any questions on the written reports from various commissioners to the representatives? Nope. Seeing no questions, then we'll accept them and say they were good and well read. With that, that's the end of the presentations and reports for today. So we will now invite public guests who registered to speak to do so. Our public participation process is designed to balance the desire to hear from the public with the need to keep meetings a reasonable length. Those of you who registered to provide a presentation will have 4 minutes to speak, followed by commissioners having an opportunity to ask brief clarifying questions. Those who registered to ask a question have 2 minutes to speak, followed by a member of commission or the Calgary Police Service having 2 minutes to respond. So please keep your comments to the topic you provided when you registered. We also cannot discuss a complaint about any specific employee or interaction with the police. If you'd like to discuss a complaint against an officer or other employee, please contact our public complaint director or the Calgary Police Service Professional Standards section so it can be properly addressed. I would also like to thank everyone who took the time. We have a number of written submissions that came in prior to this meeting. They've been provided to everybody on the commission, and we appreciate your insights. Thank you very much. And finally, a reminder to members of the media that we'll hear from the public first, and then we'll hold the media availability for you directly afterwards. So I will ask for the first speaker to be put through.
Thank you, Chair. We only have one speaker today, and it is Mr. Dylan Ames, and he would like to ask a question related to Freedom of Information requests. You should be able to speak now, Mr. Ames.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Dylan Ames. I'm speaking today on Freedom of Information requests concerns. I'm coming to you today because I recently had a Freedom of Information request take 88 days to be fulfilled. This is well outside of the mandated 30 days from the province of Alberta and the Freedom of Information Act itself. And I'm basically wanting to raise concern about this issue and how I was told it was a staffing issue, and raise concern about the fact that not even the proper extension policies from the Freedom of Information Act were followed on my request. So my question, I guess, as I would state it fully, was the commission aware of the drastic failure of the Freedom of Access or the Freedom of Information Office? And what will be done to fix these standards and make sure the 30-day requirement from the government of Alberta will be met?
Can I ask to clarify, that was a Freedom of Information request to the police service? Or the
Yes.
commission? Oh, because it's the police service. So I'm wondering if I can ask someone in the service to respond, please.
Thank you very much for the question. I won't speak to your specific case, obviously, but we're very much committed to meeting those legislated timelines. We are the busiest FOIP office in the province. To give you a sense of magnitude, in January alone, we've had almost 350 access requests. So we're seeing our numbers increase dramatically, which personally I think is a great thing because it shows more interest in transparency and access to information. We have had some unexpected departures and absences of staff. I mean, given the amount of high risk and sensitive personal information that we handle, there is about a year to an 18-month training window when we hire new folks. So we are working very hard to increase our capacity thanks to some incremental resources we have been given, but it's taking us a little while. So we absolutely are committed to meeting those timelines, and we do have plans and steps in place to address any delays. So thank you very much for the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's our last public speaker.
Okay. I hope that answered the caller's question. And with that, I think we'll move on then to the media section. So thank you to everyone. As we move to the media, if people want to stay, they're welcome to stay and listen. I would ask if you can to keep the room quiet so that we can work our way through this. So I'll ask our director where you'd like us to be located.
Thank you, Chair. We will rearrange the room here quickly for those media online. Please just raise your hand in Zoom if you do have a question, and we'll give you permission to speak, but we'll just give us a couple minutes to move to the podium, and then we'll resume. All right, thank you for your patience. We will start with Tiffany Goodwin from City Television. If I can just ask everyone in the room to just keep the volume down, that would be helpful. Thank you. Tiffany, you should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. My question is for Chief Neufeld. What do you make of Calgary recording the largest proportion of gun-related homicides in Calgary's history?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Obviously, it's a big problem. Violence in the community has been a big concern for Calgarians, and from year to year, like in a big city, it will continue to be a concern. But yeah, that's a huge problem. I think as you heard the presentation, the service has been very focused on trying to get a handle on that. We'll continue to do that. The one thing I would say is that the numbers we posted this year, while not great because one shooting, one homicide is one too many, I think we've bucked a bit of a provincial trend. I think the numbers were about a 30% increase in communities across the province. And so we're actually seeing a decrease here. So some things are going right. But as I say, again, there's a ton of work to be done because one of these is one too many. So we're committed to continuing that work there to move and drive those numbers down.
Great. I have a second question. So we also heard that, break and enters, you're seeing a trend involving firearms and an increase in smuggled firearms. What's driving this? And is the federal firearm freeze contributing to this at all?
I don't think the firearms freeze is, but I will say what's contributing to the increase in smuggled guns would be the fact that we share a border with a nation that has the most guns per capita of probably any in the world. So I think that's one challenge for sure. But great question with respect to the increase in guns that are being taken from break and enters. That's an interesting one for us to look into to see what is driving that. We know that there's been, at times, there can be straw purchasers where individuals will purchase a number of firearms and then those will sort of, air quotes, go missing from a break and enter. And so some of those break and enters may not even be legitimate. And those are all investigations that are ongoing in relation to those things. So I think that's an interesting trend. Bill C-21 from the feds, I think, did speak to some measures to beef up the borders and border security around smuggling of guns. So there may be some things that are of interest there. But for the most part, I think it's just the natural positioning of Canada in relation to the US as a source country for firearms.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. We do have another individual, but there's no media outlet attached to their name. And so if you are with an outlet, if you could just change your name to include that, that would be great.
If not, can I ask another question?
You sure can. You're the only one here, so go for it.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I've got lots of questions. So there you go.
You can go ahead if you are. If you have another question, go for it.
Sure. I saw something on Facebook about Action Table Calgary. Would someone be able to speak a little bit about what it is and how it will help Calgarians?
I believe so. Stay with me for a second.
Okay, that sounds great.
Deputy Chief McClellan just came in the room, so your timing is impeccable. So she can talk to you about all the nuances of.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks very much. Thanks for your question. And so, as many people know, we're looking to for alternative responses for people who are get the right resources to the right people at the right time. We've actually been looking nationally and internationally at different models, and so we were very fortunate to have a conversation with our partners in the East, and we've had them come out and we've gone to visit them. And so they have action tables. They've been running them for many, many years. It's over 100 plus partners who come together virtually, and really it's about offering resources to those who are in crisis. So we've been doing the same. We've been doing training with many of our internal and external partners. And in fact, we just had our first situation action table yesterday. Really, really successful. It's a great partnership with the United Way. And again, we've just started it up yesterday. Our training has gone very, very well. And really, again, it's about having all of our partners come together so that there's not duplication in services, there's not gaps, and that we're able to provide resources in a very timely fashion for those who are in need.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tiffany. We will go on to Brendan from CBC News. You should be able to speak now, Brendan.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Perfect. My question is for Chief Neufeld. I'm wondering if you can speak to how policing priorities have changed from last year to this year. Are there any key differences you'd point to?
Not really. One of the things that I would say is that when we run out of months on the calendar, some people think we start anew. But actually, when you look at the significant issues that we were dealing with in 2023, so I'm thinking of gun violence, I'm thinking of safe public spaces, the opioid crisis, this type of thing. These things continue to persist. internally, a lot of the work that we were doing around morale and engagement and this type of thing, Deputy McClellan just spoke to the evolution of the crisis response model and the work there. That's really all ongoing work. So for the most part, the major priorities I think that we were facing as a community, we continue to face them moving into 2024. So it's continued efforts in that regard.
Do you have a follow-up question?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so I think that we're done. Tiffany, you still have a hand up. Was there another question there, or is that an old hand?
I actually had a question for the redirect team. I don't know if they're here, but that's okay. I can just submit a.
They're here.
Oh, are they?
Yes, sorry to put them on the spot.
No way. Can I ask them a question?
Sure.
Okay, fantastic. Hi. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, now I can. Okay. I just have a question because I've been following the most recent cases of the Calgary youth who've been accused of terrorism and they're in court. I was just curious, have any of them gone through this program? And what would you say is the number one thing needed to get people into services so they don't end up in the court system? Because I do know that there was some similarities. They were in a chat group. And then there was this big RCMP investigation. So, like, what would you say is the number one thing to help kids so that they don't end up they don't end up getting charged or anything like that, so that there is that intervention?
Thanks for the question. I would say if the people are going through the court system, a referral could be made to the redirect program in order for our services to be provided to them. And sorry, what was the second question?
I believe it was something along the lines of, like, what would you say is the number one thing that would help prevent kids from, falling into this, going online and on these chat groups and things of that nature?
I would say the isolation component. So trying to get youth or clients out to any pro-social activities, anything community-based involvement, including family, friends, peers, positive peers, into those pro-social networks.
Great. And how many cases do you guys deal with on like a given month? Do you know?
It depends. We have a max caseload of 10 clients at a time.
Oh, wow. And you guys are at that capacity now?
No, we're not currently.
Okay, great.
Okay, perfect. I think we will end it there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and that will conclude our meeting.